Hello, everyone, and dear audience all over the globe who has tuned in to listen to today's webinar about mythical, magical audits in the privacy land. And I'm Krete Paal. I'm the CEO and co-founder of GDPR Register. And today's topic about audits, and as usual, we will cover different questions and answers what we have prepared. But in the end, we will have a Q&A section. Feel free to put any questions, comments in the chat. So already Dave from Manchester, UK. Hi, Dave. Lovely to have you in our webinar. So who else wants to join the chat? Feel free and put your questions, comments in there. We will definitely cover them in the end. And today with me, I have Rowenna Fielding, a high-level expert on different audits and with a long-term expertise in the field. So hi, Rowenna. Thank you for joining in. And maybe you can introduce a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, hi. Thanks very much, Krete, for having me on the webinar. So I have been a professional data protection nerd for more than a decade, since before the GDPR came and made data protection sexy. I am also a certified data ethics professional, and I spend my days basically helping organizations try and get the best use out of data while protecting people's rights and freedoms. I started off in information security and basically sort of slipped sideways into human rights in data.
Mm-hmm. And I think it's like a wonderful to hear people who were doing privacy and the compliance programs and projects before GDPR entered into effect. Because I think one big myth is like privacy started when GDPR entered into force, but it's not like that. It's the time before also, and still the people are the same as well.
Yes, it's very interesting how the field has changed. It's kind of, it used to be quite a niche profession, and now it's a whole industry, which, you know, has its pros and cons.
Absolutely, and a couple of weeks ago we were having our call to talk about the topic and so on, and we had like a lot of like personal stories to share on audits and the wins and the challenges and before we jump into how good audit looks like, maybe you can set the scene for us, talking about what's actually broken about the way most organizations conduct privacy GDPR audits today.
Yeah, so and this is from my own personal experience and talking to peers. I think a lot of the time what doesn't work is that the organization doesn't really know what their objective is in carrying out an audit. They're carrying out an audit because they have to have an audit. But what they're auditing and why they're auditing isn't always clear. I mean, it's easy to say, oh, we're auditing compliance, but even compliance has its levels of interpretation and rigor. So, for example, does compliance mean digging into whether an organization's definition of reasonable and appropriate is aligned with the recitals of the GDPR? Or does it mean the organization's got paperwork in place? What is the organization trying to achieve? Is it the appearance of compliance, which is basically just having paperwork that looks vaguely right? Is it corporate risk management, so managing and defending against risks that might impact the business adversely? In which case, you know, the focuses will be on like the outward facing stuff and the high risk, high sensitivity stuff, but may not actually get into whether or not data harms are occurring. Is it a quality and assurance focus? So being able to rely on its own systems and processes and people and competencies, or is it, and the gold standard is actually what the GDPR sets as a minimum baseline, protection of the rights and freedoms of living individuals while doing useful stuff with their personal data. So these are different objectives with different outcomes that have different approaches. And so I think organizations being perhaps a little bit too optimistic or even borderline delusional about what it is they're trying to achieve, and whether or not what they're auditing will achieve that is and that's not just in data protection and privacy audits as well. I've seen the same in information security audits and health and safety audits and financial audits. So I think the idea that this is a single static standard set of things that you can do that makes everything okay, that's probably the biggest mistake that's being made.
Yeah, and absolutely. And one thing that you mentioned during our last call is when management asks you to turn red things into green, and like maybe you can comment like how widespread it is, what based on your career, and why does it keep happening? Like,
well, I mean, I haven't experienced every organization in the world, but I think it's widespread enough to be alarming. When audit findings come up with non-compliances or areas of risk, the tendency, in my experience, is for senior management to go, well, we want this to look good, so we want you to do something to make it look like this thing isn't actually a problem. Not so much we want to fix the problem, if fixing the problem will cost time, energy, effort that they haven't planned, budgeted, anticipated. So I think an over optimism on the state of data protection prior to the audit is partly responsible to a lot of the response post audit from management, which is, we're too busy for this. What can we get away with in terms of looking like we fixed this? And that, I think, indicates low levels of understanding or regard for why data protection and privacy are even a thing, and why it matters at the senior levels of the organization. And at that point, I would really probably be questioning whether their stated values, and so this is putting on my data ethicist hat, are their stated values in line with their actions? But I think fundamentally it comes down to conflicting imperatives. They've got a business to run, income to maximize, risk to minimize, but only to the extent that it affects the organization. Whereas what the purpose of data protection privacy is to do is to protect human beings from each other. So cognitive bias gives rise to a lot of a lot of cope, a lot of copium.
And I think when things look good on paper, it may or definitely will create like a false sense of security, or that everything is like good, we don't have to do anything. It's like somehow like we don't have this alertness, but this is like a ball that is rolling. We need to keep on like doing our best, and it's like, okay, everything is done, like now we can do something else, and I think this is very alarming.
Yes, I would say so. I mean, it's like a little girl dressed up in sparkly finery going, "I look pretty, I look pretty." It's like, yes, you do.
Absolutely, and I think it's really like a good parallel as well. And based on your like 14 years of doing this work, what's the one element that almost every like standard GDPR audit misses entirely? Is there anything?
Yeah, outcomes. So the GDPR says a lot about how technical and organizational measures have to be effective. But nobody really seems to be measuring or even looking at whether or not what they're doing is effective. Do the measures that they have in place actually have the effects that the GDPR prescribes? Does training produce competency? Do privacy notices actually equip data subjects to make informed choices? Do governance arrangements function as described? Are people's rights and freedoms being upheld in datafication? Are people being protected from avoidable data harms? That's like the one thing. And I think it's because that is hard to measure. It requires qualitative analysis and looking at externals. It's not something that you can just riffle through a filing cabinet and count or just tick a box for. So there's a convenience factor in why this is just completely ignored by almost everyone, because it's hard, and hard means expensive and slow and disruptive. But from my point of view, if you're not looking at outcomes, why you bother auditing at all? You might just save yourselves the money and not audit, because unless you're looking at outcomes, you can't accurately gauge the degree of risk to individuals or to the organization that practices are giving rise to. You can't rely on the quality of data documentation or decision making. So, if the record of processing activity was done once and then put in a drawer, you can't rely on it as an ongoing source of operational intelligence for good business decisions. So I would say outcomes are missing in action everywhere, because what good is shiny paperwork and great practice if no one's looking to see whether or not they're appropriate to the context or fit for purpose or effective and worthwhile?
Yeah, and one thing that pops into my mind when I'm listening to it's like you have to have end in the mind, like what do you want to actually achieve, and if you put like months into this process and it's just like a fancy paper, like what's the real effect? It's like a lot of like hours went into it, and people, like the whole company contributes there. It's and what's the real business value, because it can have like a lot of effect on the foundational level, and the employees are also engaged in this, and if it is done somewhere like hidden and like based on half lies, it is like, I think it sends like such a wrong signal, like what the whole privacy institution is about. It's not sugarcoating, it's revealing the truth and learning from it and making their best. And,
facing the facts and dealing with them.
Yes, and I think the harsh reality is always better at keeping it real. So, because if you don't know the reality, it's like you're in Wonderland. So you don't know what you're actually like handling in your company, especially in the age of technology, things is moving so fast, and you don't even have the foundation right.
I think if everybody were realistic and truthful about the level of assurance and quality and safety that they're actually practicing, nobody would do business with anybody. But maybe I'm just jaded. What can I say? It's interesting you mention about kind of defined end goals, because it made me think of like audits for things like ISO 27001 and PSI DSS in the security world, especially PSI DSS, which is very prescriptive. So you have to have this, this, and this. So what organizations tend to do is try and reduce the scope as much as possible, so that they're still not looking at the overall safety of and security of the data, they are still doing the minimum amount of cost and effort to get ticks in the box. And ditto 27001. I mean, I've seen auditors go around ticking off 27002 controls, but not looking at the statement of applicability, which might say this only applies to this one table in the break room. So the big picture stuff, I think, is always is nearly always, yeah, that's not fair, is nearly always missing, just because it's hard.
Yeah, and there's a lot of things that are hard in the life, and we will face hardship in the future as well. So, and I think it builds the resilience of the organization as well, especially in tumultuous, volatile times.
Yeah.
When we look at the ideal scenario, like how would you describe like a successful GDPR audit in practice? Where does it start? How does it look like? And any like pointers or tips and tricks from your tool belt?
I mean, I would say it starts with the question, what is it you're trying to achieve?
Mm-hmm.
Do you want to have a nice report full of green things to show to your customers or supply chain, in which case you don't even need to do an audit, just write a report full of green things, it's fine. Mm-hmm. Do you want to manage the organization's risk as much as it can be managed, so compliance risk? Are you looking to defend against litigation or regulatory action, in which case there will be things that you can't control, that you just need to accept as unquantifiable risks? How far do you want this to look at unquantifiable risks? Or do you want to approach it from a quality, safety, assurance, doing right by individuals point of view, in which case it is going to be more rigorous. It is going to take longer. It is going to be more expensive, but you will be able to rely on the results. So at every level, there's a trade-off between, how much effort goes in and how much you get out of it. So the first question is, why are you doing an audit? I've seen a lot of organizations assume that the very first steps they need to take on their compliance journey is to start with an audit. And I think that's bonkers. Mm-hmm. Because if you don't have anything in place, what are you auditing? And auditing is against, a set framework or standard. Mm-hmm. Sure, start with a gap analysis. But actually, even then, I think that's probably just going to doom people to depression, so they're not going to even try. I would say always start the GDPR journey with getting people thinking enthusiastically about rights and freedoms and dangers of data. But that's just me. Mm-hmm. So I would say that the very starting point of an audit worth doing is to decide what it's supposed to be doing.
Mm-hmm. Is it something that, in your opinion, is decided by the Privacy Council or the DPO, or is it something that is presented to the management and the management approves the scope methodology, the end goals?
I've seen all of those combinations. It kind of depends on the organization. Mm-hmm. Obviously, an organization with a mature data protection and privacy program will have highly engaged senior management who will want to have a say on the scoping and the level of rigor. Whether or not the data protection officer, stroke lead, stroke manager, whatever, what their role is, whether they are actually fulfilling the statutory data protection role, which is not to do data protection for the organization, but to advise the organization on its data protection. So depending on how the data protection person is positioned, that will make a difference. I mean, if they're out there on an island, completely sort of unsupported and unengaged and unlistened to, then they might want to bring in somebody from outside to get people's eyes opened and to make them understand that they can't just carry on like that. So yeah, there's a big, I mean, standard data protection person's answer, it depends. There's a big it depends on that one.
Yeah, and I think like a lot of I've conducted GDPR audits in my previous career, and it's basically like someone like I have a legal background. I am not an auditor. It was already like really like challenging to understand like how do I even do it? How's the process going to look like, and what does the methodology look like? So. And I've talked to like one of attorneys in Estonia as well about GDPR audits to help to understand like how do people do it, and it is so different. Everyone has like a different understanding what it means. So you don't know actually what's the overlap. Is it the same thing? Are we even talking about the same thing? Because the term audit is already like, it can mean so many things for different people. It's like compliance review, gap checks, or something like that. So how to approach this methodology, or like what to even ask, or what to pay attention to, or is it depending on really like what they want to achieve? And it doesn't always have to be like this 200 questions or 200 topics. It can be like a mini audit as well.
Yeah, I absolutely. The methodology, the structure, the process is completely going to depend on why you're even doing it in the first place.
Mm-hmm.
And I think you don't necessarily have to be a trained auditor to produce something that the organization can get value from. But I think you do need to understand the nature of well, the unnature of data. So whether you're going around counting things, you know, what do those things you're counting actually represent? So the number of privacy notices an organization has, or the number of data subject access requests an organization has, says nothing about how good their transparency is, or whether they are processing data lawfully and fairly. Mm-hmm. So understanding the subject, what it is you're trying to achieve, and you know the sort of scope of what you've got to work with. Sometimes it can be worthwhile just looking at the governance stuff itself. You know, how are decisions made? Who gets involved? Who keeps a record? Are the records used as reference materials in the future? I mean, that can actually take a lot of the foundational problems with poor data protection and make them into strengths. So I think a lot of people have a tendency to go straight for details like, is there a privacy notice? Is there a process? Is there a policy? You know, does the paperwork exist? Mm-hmm. And again, as you said earlier, get a false sense of assurance, because you know, a policy that no one can find, no one can understand, no one can apply because it's completely unrealistic, and isn't enforced anyway, is no better than having no policy at all. So,
and what kind of advice would you give to people doing these GDPR audits, and they want to assess the organizational competence that you mentioned? Like, how do you actually value whether people in an organization understand and apply the principles that are agreed?
Well, hashtag shameless plug. I did actually author a data protection competency framework a few years back, and it is so this isn't this is a shameless plug, but it's not a commercial one. It's free for anybody to look at. And what I did, spent 6 months looking at what data protection competency actually is, and what it requires. So there's things like, you know, you can get a dependency mapping out of it. So by looking at the competency framework, the dependencies that people have, like in order to understand the policy, there has to be a policy. In order to adhere to it, it must be possible to follow. You can also use it to measure organizational competency and governance. I have yet to see anybody use this as an audit framework, possibly because, you know, it wasn't created by the Big Four.
For me, it was like, because I never thought about it. Never thought about it. And how do you measure, like, basically like a unicorn, something that you can't touch or see? Like, how do you approach it? So, and for me, it was like very like eye-opening when we had our call, and when I actually start like even like deep thinking. It's like so much like information that I haven't thought about before. It's because it is like something which is like audit itself. I was very humbled from the beginning, and I think knowledge and wisdom how to approach these processes, because it is a process, comes with just trial and error and what works, and it's work with people.
Yes.
It is to work with people. So, and
I think it's always more worth asking people about how they feel than what they do. If you ask people what they do, then they're going to tell you what they think you want to hear to give the organization green things instead of red things. But if you ask them how they feel, like, do you feel that the processes you go through are robust enough to protect people from data harms? Do you feel that senior management is sufficiently engaged in decision making? Do you feel that people's rights and freedoms are prioritized over making use of their data? Do you feel like the privacy notice is actually a clear and friendly explanation of what's going on behind the scenes? Asking people how they feel is much less confrontational and much less of an interrogation, and will actually get you more insightful results than kind of asking people a question to which they know what the answer should be and they know what the answer is, and they have to perhaps make a choice between which of the two they give.
Yeah, and I've heard some like urban legends from different cybersecurity audits, when actually people are prepared what you can say, what you can't say, and what these are the sentences you must say. It's like in order to pass the audit, and it has been quite a drill. I've understood that it's like 2 weeks before that everyone is like witness statement prepared. So
yeah, I mean, which makes the audit, you know, a kind of waste of time and money, unless what they're going through is a superficial cosmetic piece of paper that isn't going to provide them any assurance or reliability. And if that's what they want, fair enough, you know, that's what they're spending their money on. But if what they're looking for is safe outcomes, that's not the way to do it.
Absolutely. And you work with different clients, and some who are there because they have to be, and some because who are generally want to get things right. So does your approach change depending on which one you're dealing with?
Well, it's not often the organizations that are not sincere and well-meaning about data protection stay with me, because I tend to tell them that they need to do more than they want to do, and so they'll go off and find a consultant who will tell them what they want to hear instead. It's fine by me. But yeah, so the clients who come to me and stay with me are generally there because they want to do things properly. What they want is help navigating the constraints that you know, an organization, the industry, the world around us, limited time and effort, etc., place on them. So my methodology might change depending on the organization. So, for example, if I'm dealing with a national federated UK charity with like 152 branches across England, Scotland, and Northern Ireland, then my approach is going to be a little bit different to if I'm dealing with a tech startup of 5 people. So yeah, but one thing that doesn't change is I will start with, what is it you're trying to achieve? Why are you trying to achieve that? And what makes you think that doing this is going to help? Just out of interest.
And are they surprised by these questions, or do they really go and think about it?
I get a lot of, that never really occurred to me. And yeah, we could approach this another way. We don't have to start with an audit. We can start by building good things instead of counting the gaps and the bad things. Yeah, but sometimes they'll be like, look, we have to have an audit because our corporate customers say we have to have an audit, or we've got to comply with this certain industry framework, so we have to have an audit.
We need a paper. We need a paper.
Yeah. And then the question is, okay, do you want anything more than that paper? Like, do you want to be able to rely on that paper? Or do you just want a piece of paper? So the discussion unfolds, depending on the size and position and industry of the organization I'm working with, and the people I'm talking to. Do often say, better the devil you know. It's better to know about things and demonstrate that you know about them, but perhaps you're not in a position to fix them yet, but you're working on it, than to do the la la la, I can't hear you kind of 6-year-old approach to bad news.
Absolutely. And privacy is part of business, and it's the risks that you have to manage. And if you don't have an understanding of a lay of land, so what are you actually managing? So
yeah, I would go even further. I would say that data protection, as in so wider than just privacy, the protection of fundamental rights, is part of society. And the world has seen the bad things that happen when there isn't some kind of brakes on what people can do with data and to each other using data. And so while it might be inconvenient or expensive for business, from a wider social point of view, it's still worth it. Yeah. I mean, that's not a very popular argument in this day and age when everything is about economic advantage and the bottom line. But there are, and I work a lot with the voluntary charity third sector. That argument is easier to make to them, I'd say.
Yeah, and I think like when data, and then especially personal data, is considered the new sunshine, because you can always reuse it and derive more data and more conclusions. It's like it's like what you handle, you have to handle with care. And actually, I think that the societies, as like a general, like they will start expecting more from the companies, and I think that this is also something that I expect, like people to like voice out, like we want more from the big tech, like the tech in itself, different service providers, and we just have to be more vocal.
I think there's an overestimation of what data is. Like it's some, magical fairy dust that's just lying around waiting to be picked up. No, actually, data is the output of a series of human decisions and human and technological processes. There is no data without human effort. And there is no data without there being a reason to create data. So data is always inherently biased for a start. But also digital data technology is the most dangerous technology humanity has ever come up with in terms of scale, reach, and impact of the harm it can do. And it's bigger than nuclear bombs. Like nuclear bombs have physical constraints. Kind of data doesn't.
There is no limits. Like,
yeah,
no limits. Yeah.
And I think in the rush to exploit the economic value of data, we've got to a point, really a critical point, where the the hazards and the harms are slowly being recognized, but we've become so dependent on exploiting it, much like with fossil fuels, that kind of no one really wants to walk that back. And that goes back to, again, what is it you're trying to achieve? Like, is this a corporate social responsibility, environmental, social governance thing you're doing here? Or is it a compliance tick boxing thing? Or is it an ethics thing? So that really underlies everything about the audit. I've not seen many organizations frame data protection as a corporate social responsibility exercise, but I think that's what it is, far more so than a legal compliance thing.
Absolutely. And I think this also circles back to one loose cannon, which is where the data is shared and transferred to, and this like third-party risk management, which some, or maybe like most companies use like we have the contract, tick, done. So how to make like a meaningful like vendor management side, like how do you evaluate that? How do you evaluate your vendors?
Well, again, there's levels. So you can say to them, are you perfectly safe and compliant? And they go, yes, honest. And they go, and you go, okay, like on the trust me, bro thing, you can get them to provide some evidence. And then you've got a decision to make as to, how closely you actually examine that evidence. So it's like, oh, we have a data protection policy. Yeah, but your data protection policy talks about PII and information security. It doesn't actually mention data protection anywhere. So that's no good. The approach that I take when I'm doing, because I do quite a lot of vendor due diligence, I will go and look at their privacy notice and look for red flags. I will see what their e-privacy cookie compliance is like. I will look at the differences between their terms and conditions and their privacy notice. So I will basically go around looking for red flags. And I often find them. And then if they've got their own model template data processing agreement, I will go through that and I will look for red flags. I'll look at whether or not there are gaps between what they're going to do as a processor and what they will also do as a controller in their own right, and see where those gaps fall. So I think it's an approach that works for me because I'm one of life's natural nitpickers. But looking for indications that there is something wrong is more fruitful than just accepting assurance that everything is right.
Yeah, absolutely. And just a reminder to our audience as well, like feel free to drop questions in the Q&A. So we will cover them a little bit later. So, but let's put it like this, that we have done like our best audit, like the best we could do it to approach it in a way. We find real issues, we report it, and the leadership doesn't act. Like, how do you frame audit findings so that the CEO or CFO or CTO actually feels that there is an urgency that we need to act?
I would ask them before I start auditing, I would ask them two questions. One is, what is it you most hope to achieve? And the other one is, what are you most afraid of? And then whatever the findings, I will frame those findings as, this is what you need to achieve the thing you want to achieve, and this is what you need to do to avoid the thing you're scared of. It's a little bit of psychological tactics there. So yeah, that's about knowing your audience and framing it. I'm not very good at kind of double think, double speak. I tend to say exactly what I mean and mean exactly what I say. So I will frame an audit finding in terms of, this is what your legal compliance risk is. This is what your business practical operational risk is. And this is what your ethical CSR reputational risk is. You get to choose which one you care most about.
Yeah. and also sharing like maybe what you have seen in different organizations, like how do they maintain meaningful oversight after the audit? Like what kind of processes are in place? Is it something that there's like update to management every day? Who needs to do the tasks that were mentioned? Like whose responsibility is afterwards in-house?
Yes. Organizations that just assume that everything is always going to work the way it's intended and supposed to work will always find themselves being caught out in nasty surprises by audit findings. So if they're not like tucking away a contingency fund for fixing problems, whether that's bringing in somebody to assist or spreading workload across people, or investing in some consultancy for more efficient, effective ways to work, whatever. If they're already at the edge of the resources they have, they're not going to be able to fix anything, because that will take time and effort and disruption and money. The question of who does what is a really interesting one. That's why I said looking at governance is a good way to start, because the actions from an audit, I mean, really none of them should be on the DPO to do, but it's often the DPO that gets saddled with make us compliant. It's impossible.
Yeah.
So the response to audit, is really variable. It goes from make red things green to we're going to do a complete shake up of our culture and governance so that we can tackle this properly in future, to here's some money, go away and spend it so I don't have to listen to you anymore. There's a big range. It all comes back to what are they trying to achieve.
Have you ever had an experience with a client who read through your audit document, your conclusions, and said that you got it wrong and it's not actually that bad, and start to argue with you that it's not right?
Interestingly, I have, but only when I was in-house as a DPO,
In-house.
not as a consultant. Often as a consultant, I come in and I will be saying exactly the same things the in-house DPO has already said, which I will always point out. It's like, this person you have here has been saying these things. Why have you not listened to them? You've just wasted extra money on me to say the same things. But yeah, when I was in-house, it'll be like, well, we can't have that on our audit report. Change it. I'm like, but that's what it is. But it doesn't look good. Well, how about we change reality instead of the paperwork?
Yeah, and I think a lot of privacy counsels or DPOs who are doing that audit also feel pressured. Their job is in threat if they don't comply, which goes against the independence requirement from the GDPR. And then I've heard that there is like a lot of like, if you give them the finger, we will take the whole hand. So you will be basically the rubber stamp that you will write out everything that the management wants. So how to win that game that you will stick, and that's basically your principle. You will stick to your opinion.
I mean, principles are great. You've got to be able to afford to have them, though. I mean, having said that, I've known quite a few people who've gone to work for big tech companies like Meta, for example, with the fond hope that they can make a difference from the inside, and they've all either gone completely they've either kind of sold their integrity for a comfortable lifestyle, or they've burnt out and left. There doesn't seem to be a middle ground there. I'm not going to judge anybody for doing what they feel they need to do to pay the bills, but I will judge them if that doesn't actually include some kind of professional integrity. So, and again, there are lawyers whose data protection, privacy lawyers, who see their job as helping clients find ways around the law. And, as an idealist, that gives me the ick. But as a realist, I recognize that this is going to happen. So I think, again, it comes back to the what do you most want to achieve? What are you most afraid of? Framing all the findings, all the decisions, all the conversations to senior managements in terms of its relevance to those two is probably as good as it gets.
Mm-hmm. True. We have 15 minutes until the end of our session. So any comments, questions, put them in the chat. But until then, maybe one question I've always asked from our webinar guests is if there is one thing, Rowenna, that you would like the audience to take with them from this conversation, what would you like it to be?
Well, my usual tagline is "Don't be a git," because that's, to me, what the fundamentals of data protection is all about. Doing integrity and trying to be a good person. But for this particular conversation, I would definitely say figure out what it is you're trying to achieve, and then build the audit work around that. And don't be afraid to think creatively and take different approaches, and move away from the standard checklists and counting things. Mindful auditing. Do you know the brand I could sell? Mindful auditing.
Auditing, yeah. Dave is also commenting that a really useful tip about asking people how they feel. Thanks for that. And he works for an education organization. And there was already a strong understanding of safeguarding of students at the physical, emotional level. I've been reasonably successful in talking to teachers about data protection in those terms. Wonderful, Dave.
Really good angle. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And especially considering children and children's data. And it is something that we need to keep safe overall, and talking to teachers about it. And also, I don't know, have you ever been to schools talking about privacy? How do you explain what privacy is to the younger generation?
Well, I mean, for a start, privacy and data protection, not the same thing. Yeah. So I would say privacy is privacy is about the relationships you have with other people and the boundaries you're able to set. Whereas data protection is about protecting people from each other when data is involved. So if I were explaining to like 10-year-olds, that's how I would put it. So yeah, that's kind of the fundamental. But yeah, I would always frame it in if I were talking to schools, it will be in terms of student welfare, protection of staff as well, because keeping good records, reliable records, is a big part of data protection. And if staff don't have the protection of reliable records, then who's to say what has happened in any given circumstance? The other problem is that schools have is that they generally have no money at all. Like local authority funding has just disappeared. In which case, I would probably say things like don't try and look at using AI for homework marking or biometric authentication for lunches. You do not have the capacity to do this safely. Keep it simple. I mean, it depends on the school. I've also worked with, fee-paying schools for the children of the wealthy, and they are less concerned with the privacy of the children than they are with how happy the parents are with what the children are doing. So yeah, but framing data protection as corporate social responsibility, being humane in an industrialized world, doing the the right thing for people. Yeah, I've got my data ethicist hat on again. But also being about quality and assurance. I think that's a far more compelling argument than because the law says.
Yeah. I was visiting some of our clients last week, and one of them was like a smaller startup processing personal data, and they asked me to ask you, what's the minimum viable audit for a smaller organization with limited resources? Where should they focus first?
I'm going to come back with the same thing. What is it they're trying to achieve? Why do they want to know? Why are they looking at audit?
For them, it was because the clients are asking to deliver something in a format. They were thinking about that it should be right, it should be correct, it should reflect the reality, but they didn't know how to even approach it. It's like, what do we do? So they wanted like the best outcome, but like, how do you even how do you do it even? So like, what is like, and they were just afraid that in their mind, audit meant like 200 pages of questions and stuff like that. And what's your take on like, if a startup, really a smaller startup, wants to do?
I would start by saying probably by looking at what is it you're doing and why. So, I mean, I know a lot of people will start with data inventory, and personally, I'm not hugely keen on that, because it can often miss the whole point of like what and why. So, what are your business processes? Why are you carrying them out? And then identify, do you understand what personal data, the phrase means? Because if you don't, then there's your audit finding. Go away and learn about it. And if so, then where is personal data processed? Not where is data stored or collected, but where is it processed? That's really important. Has anyone had any kind of learning or education in relation to data protection and responsibilities? Because again, if not, there's your audit finding. Go and get some. No, I say learning and education, not training. And what are you telling people about what you're doing? So as the very, very basic, this is where we want to start. I would say that's more than enough to A, get a good start on data protection, and B, set up for more development in the future.
And I think like a lot of companies may approach data protection and privacy as a legal thing, not like the whole organization thing. Like, how do you break that mindset?
Keep reminding them that it's about people, it's about human beings. The reason that it's a law is that left to their own devices, governments and businesses and groups of people will not behave well. We know this because we've seen the evidence. So we have a law that says this is what behaving well looks like. Again, I always present in terms of 3 types of risk. There's your legal risk. So how likely are you to get fined, nicked, or sued? There's your operational risk. What will go wrong for the organization if you don't do this? And then there's the human risk. Are you okay with harming people even if they don't know it was you? Are you okay with harming people even if they can't make you accountable for it? Are you okay with not knowing whether you're harming people, as long as you don't have to, confront the possibly unpleasant reality? And are you okay with harming or mistreating people when you don't have to do it like that? So those are the 3 types of risk that I will frame when I'm talking to lawyers, I'll talk about legal risk. When I'm talking to project managers and program managers and CEOs, I'll generally talk about operational risk. When I'm talking to frontline staff, I always talk about the human risk.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
I found that's quite effective.
Yeah. Have you ever heard, considering the work that you have done with your clients, that your audit or audit summary has been submitted to the Data Protection Authority in the course of privacy proceedings that they've had, that they've submitted it? Have you ever had that kind of experience, that the Data Protection Authority has asked about it?
Yes. Also, when I was working in-house for an
Mm.
organisation, the UK regulator, the ICO, actually came along and said, "We'd like to offer you a voluntary audit," which everybody knows that you do not say no to the ICO offering you a voluntary audit, because saying no is a red flag.
You have something to hide.
Exactly. But I really welcomed that.
Mhm.
As the data protection officer, I wanted the ICO to come in and lend their muscle, back when the ICO had some muscle, to reinforce what I was saying, because I knew that senior management weren't going to listen to me, because they already weren't listening to me.
Mhm.
But the regulator turning up and saying, you need to do these things, was really useful. So I was like, yes, yeah, we'd love an audit. Help yourself, come in. And actually, it turned out that the audit they did was pretty superficial.
Mhm. Okay. Okay. Yeah.
I left not long after.
We let it be in that point. We let it be. But yeah, it's basically the end of our webinar. So we will definitely share the recording and a link to Rowenna's publication as well about meaningful audits. And Rowenna, is there anything you would like to add in the end as well?
Just my general kind of permanent messages, which is think for yourself and don't be a git. But I would like to extend my huge thanks to you for asking me to come on and have this chat. I've really enjoyed it. It's been super fun, and I hope it's been useful and interesting to the audience. I do like getting on my soapbox. So thank you for the opportunity.
For coming and sharing so much useful information that you harnessed throughout the years, and I don't know if I can say, like, happy meaningful auditing to all the audience as well, so here in the future. So thank you so much, Rowenna, and thank you all of our webinar listeners as well, today and tomorrow, and when the recording is available. So, and Dave, Sophie, Stella, all saying thank you so much for your insights as well. So wishing you all a lovely continuous springtime, and see you next time, hopefully already in May. So good day, good evening, good morning to all of our listeners, and happy meaningful auditing. Goodbye.